Welcome, Age of Vintage Society. Known for his deep voice and steely gravitas, Richard Burton was one of the most famous film stars of his time, from his tumultuous relationships, and not one but two marriages to Elizabeth Taylor, to his acclaimed performances in hits like Cleopatra and Beckett. The press constantly printed stories about Burton, with many critics suggesting that he could be the next Laurence Olivier. However, there was a terrible dark side to Burton's fame. He struggled with alcohol addiction, made catastrophic personal choices. How Richard Burton's sister became his mother. Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. He was the boy from the Welsh valleys whose rugged looks and voice of gold made him a star of stage and screen. In the 1960s, the most popular actor in the world was Richard Burton, a hard-drinking Welshman who was nevertheless so professional that he was one of the pre-eminent stage performers of his day. In fact, he performed Shakespeare so magnificently that he was compared to British legend Laurence Olivier, and that success ultimately led to a film career that earned him 7 Academy Award nominations, as well as BAFTA and Golden Globe Awards for Best Actor. Given his accomplishments on stage and in Hollywood, Burton became one of the world's most recognizable leading men, so it seemed fitting that he engaged in one of Hollywood's most legendary romances with Elizabeth Taylor while on the set of Cleopatra, one of the era's most notorious movies. In fact, his tumultuous relationship with Taylor, which included 2 marriages, dominated tabloids and remains the one thing most people associate with Burton today, despite the rest of his accomplishments. Burton's high-profile marriages to Taylor helped bring him attention, but they also led to more self-destructive behaviour, and in a sense they represented the peak of Burton's career. Over the last decade of his life, Burton began appearing in mediocre films, and due to his declining health and constant drunkenness, his performances were mediocre as well, often involving incoherent slurring. Richard Burton was born Richard Walter Jenkins on November 10, 1925, in Pontrhydd Fen, South Wales, to Edith Maud Thomas and Richard Walter Jenkins, a coal miner. Edith had 13 children in 26 years. The death of their mother was a bitter blow to the family. Dick dealt with it by going his own way, taking more frequently to drink and living a nomadic life, moving from daughter to daughter. The younger children were farmed out to elder relatives. Richard was scooped up by his sister Cecilia and taken to live with her and her husband, Elfrid, and their 2 daughters, Marion and Rhiannon, in Port Talbot. Cecilia was devoted to her younger brother and brought him up as her own. She had a positive, deep and lasting effect on Richard, and he remained forever grateful for her throughout his varied and colourful life. When my mother died, she, my sister, had become my mother, and more mother to me than any mother could have ever been. He lived with them for 15 years. While Richard was growing into adolescence with all the usual energy and angst, Cis was stretched to the limit. While Cis more than filled Richard's need for a mother, he idolised Ifor, his brother, who was 19 years senior. As the 3rd Jenkins child, Ifor would turn his hand to anything: coal mining, rugby football, building, plumbing, mechanics and poetry. Ifor became Richard's rock and protector throughout his life, leaving the Welsh valleys behind to join Richard as his personal assistant and go wherever his brother's career took him. At 15, Richard was an independent boy who liked smoking, drinking and girls. He was strong and a good sportsman. He had an appetite to learn and later would find great pleasure in writing. It was the sports field that got his undivided attention at school. An avid fan of Shakespeare, poetry and reading, he once said, "Home is where the books are." At the age of 17, he moved into the home of Philip Burton, his English teacher and mentor. Philip Burton later became Richard's legal guardian, and Richard subsequently adopted his surname. Years later, on being interviewed together, Philip Burton was asked, "How did you come to adopt him?" When Philip paused to give an answer, Richard jumped in and said, "He didn't adopt me, I adopted him." Burton's first professional stage appearance occurred after he auditioned successfully for a small part in Emlyn Williams' play The Druid's Rest, which opened at the Royal Court Theatre in Liverpool in November 1943. Williams and Burton had the same roots. Williams knew that the boy was going to be famous. The startling looks, fearless green eyes set widely in a dramatic face. After leaving school, he entered Exeter College, Oxford, to read English literature and Italian. Here he met and became friends with fellow actor Robert Tim Hardy and Neville Coghill. Fellow in English literature and director of the Friends of the Oxford University Dramatic Society, Burton followed a compressed 6-month course offered by the university during wartime for those proceeding to military service, and afterwards joined the Royal Air Force. Training as a navigator in Canada, he was discharged in 1947, after which he accepted a $30 a week salary with a London theatre company. By now, Richard was enjoying habits that remained unbroken for the rest of his life: drinking, smoking, reading and doing crosswords. It was on the set of Dolwyn that he met his first wife. Sybil Williams was a 19-year-old drama student with a small part in the film. They married a few months after meeting. He was 23. That voice, capable of so many shades and gear changes, would become the young actor's secret weapon. Richard Burton began making a name for himself. While regarding himself as a theatre actor, he spent the next 4 to 5 years commuting between London and Los Angeles. Corder loaned him to 20th Century Fox for a 3-picture deal. The films he made under Fox were My Cousin Rachel, opposite Olivia de Havilland. For this film he received an Oscar nomination, Desert Rat and The Robe. For the 3 films, Burton received £80,000, while Corder's cut was £15,000. Burton was making it big. Across the Atlantic, Richard's reputation grew, and in 1953 Darryl Zanuck offered him a 7-picture deal for $1 million. With a commitment to do Hamlet at the Old Vic for £45 a week, Richard turned down the offer. He made his point. He was independent and strong-willed. Money was nice, but it was not everything to the actor, whose greatest joys were words, words, and words. Of course, the gossip drums beat out across Hollywood while Burton made his way back to London. In 1953 he collaborated with John Gielgud on acclaimed productions of Hamlet and Coriolanus at the Old Vic, and while his Hamlet was considered too strident, his Coriolanus was an undisputed triumph. Once again Philip was there to coach him. His Hamlet was one of revenge, not a poetical angst-ridden young prince. Burton, however, was already being courted by Hollywood. Jessica, Richard and Sybil's second daughter, was born in 1960. Richard adored his children. He was close to Kate throughout his life. Jessica suffered from schizophrenia and autism, which anguished him and made him reflect with deep thoughts of concern and helplessness. He wrote tenderly in his notebooks about both daughters. While he continued to make films in Hollywood, some of which were classed as mediocre, Richard never failed to remind the public of his outstanding talent. A promising start in Darryl Zanuck's melodrama My Cousin Rachel led to a Best Actor Oscar nomination, and another followed for his starchy portrayal of a Roman soldier. For the rest of the 1950s, movies and the theatre competed for Burton's wavering attention. There was only ever going to be one winner. After a lean patch in the mid to late 1950s, he delivered a powerful turn as the acidic, malcontent Jimmy Porter in a film version of John Osborne's play Look Back in Anger. His classical training made him popular with producers of that dying genre, the epic, and in 1963 he was cast as Mark Antony opposite Elizabeth Taylor in Joseph Mankiewicz's impossibly grandiose period drama Cleopatra. Cleopatra was the most expensive film of its time and made international headlines throughout its production. To preserve its future, 20th Century Fox desperately needed the film to be a financial success, and, with Elizabeth Taylor playing Cleopatra and demanding an unprecedented fee of $1 million, the studio was only happy to watch the publicity machine go into overdrive about her hairstyles, jewels, acting, figure, and temper. It was not so happy when the publicity turned to gossip and speculations about her adulterous affair with her co-star Richard Burton, who was playing Antony. While Elizabeth got her $1 million fee, in fact she got paid more like $3 million due to overrun fees, Richard got the best financial contract of his life, $500,000 for 10 weeks' work, with $1,000 a week expenses. Sybil and the children joined him in Rome for filming. Burton at first didn't think much of his co-star. To call her the most beautiful woman in the world was absurd. She was a pampered Hollywood princess, probably couldn't act, and would have to be propped up. Instead it was he, in the middle of a vast military-scale production, who got nervous. In their first scene together, she kindly calmed him, and it was at that moment that they fell in love. However, when the gossip about his affair with Elizabeth got too loud, Sybil left with the children and went to New York to visit Philip Burton. The affair seemed to set the world press on fire. The Vatican spoke out, and the American Congress sought to prevent them from entering America again. Initially the studio was anxious and angry with the couple. However, it soon became apparent that their pairing would increase box office sales. The couple was currency. His relationship with the actress Elizabeth Taylor became the subject of an international scandal, attracting a relentless media scrutiny which was to become a pervasive and frequently oppressive presence throughout Burton's life. Liz and Dick, as they were known, lived on a grand scale. He bought her jewels, including the 69-carat Cartier diamond. They bought a yacht for $500,000. On a more conventional note, they adopted a daughter, Maria. In Taylor he met his match, and someone who could bring him to heel. Their time together, and apart, was peppered with fights, splits, reconciliations, bouts of heavy drinking, tantrums, and lavish spending. The Taylor-Burton scandal ensured the overlong Cleopatra would be a hit at the box office when it was released in 1963, and for the next 5 years Burton was one of the top 10 box office draws, co-starring with his wife in the VIPs, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Franco Zeffirelli's The Taming of the Shrew, and Boom. Burton and Taylor were said to have made $88 million in the mid-1960s, while spending $65 million on villas, jewels, private jets, and extravagant entertaining. As Burton said of their wealth, "I've made more millions than I can count, but you know it's fairy gold. The tax people take most of it, and the rest goes to people you need to stay alive, places to live, conveyances to get from here to there." Partly because Burton was a tempestuous alcoholic, he and Taylor divorced in 1974. So great was the pull between them, however, that on October 10, 1975, they remarried. Burton once said of Taylor, "Our love is so furious we burn each other out." As if to prove the point, the couple once more divorced in July 1976. When Taylor and Burton divorced for the first time in 1974, he was said to be drinking 3 bottles of vodka a day and smoking up to 100 cigarettes. As he said, he used alcohol to burn up the flatness, the stale, empty, dull deadness that one feels when one goes off stage. Burton dried out in California, having admitted to being fairly sloshed for 5 years. He had made a welcome comeback in the 1978 film The Wild Geese, and was preparing to film a sequel, but was replaced by Edward Fox. In Burton's final analysis, an actor is something less than a man, while an actress is something more than a woman. But together Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor were pure gold, both on-screen and off, one of the 20th century's most glamorous and alluring couples. In 1982 he took the title role in the film epic Wagner. On the set he met Sally Hay, who was working as a freelance production assistant. Sally was a successful, independent career woman, and Richard was impressed. The fast life ultimately caught up with him in 1984 when a cerebral hemorrhage killed him at the age of 58. Fittingly, it was the same cause of death that befell his alcoholic father in 1957, just as Burton was at the precipice of Hollywood stardom. He was one of the rowdy generation of angry young working-class actors who burst onto the British stage and screen in the mid-1950s, and may well have been the most talented of them. But these days he's best remembered for his tempestuous relationship with Elizabeth Taylor, and the general view is that Burton squandered his extraordinary gifts in a long train of dodgy films beneath his talent. There's some truth in this assertion, but it's far from the whole story, and a handful of intense screen performances prove just how good an actor he was. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the life and legacy of Richard Burton? He became the leading member of a new generation of outstanding actors in the 50s.